So Tom Ford's Tobacco Vanille, that fragrance, or the scent profile anyway, I was first introduced to that particular scent profile by way of Alexandria's Sweet Smoke. I would say several years ago, probably 6 to 7 years ago or so, is when I first smelled that fragrance. And although now I do love that fragrance and the way that it smells, it was not like a love at first sniff, at least for me. I had blind bought that fragrance from Alexandria, and I mean, I was literally selling the fragrance like the same day that I got it, I believe. So it wasn't for me during that point in time in my life anyway. But now pretty much I do really enjoy the way that the fragrance smells. It is definitely still more sort of like a mature type of scent. Definitely going to be more so geared towards like, winter and fall for the most part. But I do, again, still really enjoy the way that the fragrance smells. So what I have here today is I'm going to be going over pretty much 2 inspired fragrances of Tobacco Vanille. One being from Fragrance World, the other being from Maison Alhambra. So the one from Fragrance World is going to be Vanille En Tobacco, and the one from Maison Alhambra is going to be Tobacco Touch. So I think most of you all are going to be familiar with Tobacco Touch from Maison Alhambra. That's definitely the more sort of popular one that I see that most people have. Whereas the Vanille En Tobacco is not necessarily as popular. I haven't really seen too many people really talk about Vanille En Tobacco. And we're going to compare the two and see, which one is better. All right. So if you're not familiar with the way that, Tom Ford's Tobacco Vanille smells, or the notes of that fragrance, the notes in the top notes are going to be tobacco leaf and spicy notes. In the mid, you have vanilla, cacao, tonka bean, and tobacco blossom. And then the base, you have dried fruits and woody notes. And pretty much what I get from Tobacco Vanille is when you first spray that fragrance on, and I have the little sample of it here, have it sprayed on this strip here over to the left. The way that Tobacco Vanille comes across to me is it comes across as you get the sort of spicy clove, sort of cinnamon spice from the fragrance. And I mean, you do get some tobacco as well, but at least for me anyway, what I also get with Tobacco Vanille is what almost sort of smells like a sort of honey note, or honey note. I don't see honey anywhere in the note breakdown. And I mean, I've never really heard anyone, kind of mention that about Tobacco Vanille. But at least to my nose, that's what I sort of pick up in the background. Is like this really thick, dense sort of honey note. And really, it to me anyway, it kind of takes over everything else in the fragrance. Now, I mean, as of right now, I can still sort of smell, again, the sort of spiciness that you get from the fragrance, as well as, sort of like the tobacco leaf, the dried fruits for sure. But at least with the original, I'm mainly getting, at least in the opening anyway, which this has only been sprayed on for a couple of minutes now, I'm mainly getting like this, again, really thick honey note. Now, for Vanille En Tobacco, that fragrance, to me, it comes the closest to the original Tom Ford fragrance. So definitely closer than the Tobacco Touch. The main difference that I get between Tobacco Vanille and the Vanille En Tobacco and Tobacco Touch is those two fragrances, the 2 inspired fragrances, they don't really have that sort of honey note that I'm picking up on in the original Tobacco Vanille. Yeah, I really don't pick up on that really at all in those 2 fragrances. But in my opinion, the Vanille En Tobacco or at least the Vanille En Tobacco, I would say not so much the Tobacco Touch, but the Vanille En Tobacco does have pretty much everything else that, Tobacco Vanille has. So I am still picking up on, plenty of tobacco. I'm picking up on that sort of clove and cinnamon spice that you get from, the Tobacco Vanille. I'm definitely also picking up on the vanilla, the dried fruits, the sort of tobacco blossom note for sure. At least for me, I don't really pick up on too much of any sort of cacao in Tobacco Vanille really at all. I think that's probably just there as sort of like a, kind of supporting note that you really don't notice. But yeah, I don't really pick up on too much of any sort of cacao vibe from either one of these. Now, the differences I would say between Vanille En Tobacco and Tobacco Touch are Tobacco Touch is definitely like the lighter, more sort of watered down version, in my opinion, of what Tobacco Vanille is. So for the most part, the main things that I pick up on with Tobacco Touch are I get a lot of that sort of, cinnamon and clove spice with this. And I mean, just a very slight hint of tobacco and vanilla for the most part. So I really don't get the dried fruit vibe from, Tobacco Touch. And I mean, again, the tobacco in this is very sort of non-existent, at least to my nose anyway. And it just doesn't wear as dense as what the Vanille En Tobacco does. Now, the Vanille En Tobacco is not going to wear as dense as what Tobacco Vanille does. And again, in my opinion, it seems to be because of that extra sort of honey note that I pick up on in Tobacco Vanille. And again, I'm not sure if it's honey. I'm not sure if I know when I went to Tom Ford's like official website and actually looked at how they kind of describe Tobacco Vanille. One thing that they did mention was I believe they mentioned something about like a thick sort of tree sap or something like that that's supposed to be within this particular scent. Maybe that's more of what I'm smelling is what they're kind of recreating to be, sort of like a tree sap sort of note. I'm not sure. At least to me anyway, though, it comes across as smelling like honey. And in my opinion, the honey note in Tobacco Vanille sort of smells like the honey note that you would get in something like this scent profile, like, Tabacular, or the Maison Alhambra's Tobacco. The honey in this is definitely going to be a lot more stronger, sweeter, denser for sure, louder. But it definitely reminds me of Tabacular for sure, as far as how that honey note comes across in Tobacco Vanille. So in my opinion, I would say that Vanille En Tobacco is definitely the more higher quality smell, when compared to Tobacco Touch. Now, I know obviously there's the other clone out there or inspired fragrance from, Paris Corner. It's called Cheruto or something like that. That one, I think it's called Cheruto Tobacco Vanille or something like that. That one I haven't smelled, so I can't really say exactly how close that fragrance comes to Vanille En Tobacco or Tobacco Touch. But in terms of these two, for sure, Vanille En Tobacco is going to be the higher quality smell, in my opinion. Like I said, both of them, they don't have that sort of honey note between each of them. But in terms of the Vanille En Tobacco, I feel like the Vanille En Tobacco, it has everything else that Tobacco Vanille has. And to be honest with you, the way that Vanille En Tobacco smells without it having that sort of honey note to it, I do actually prefer that. I prefer the way that the Vanille En Tobacco smells over the original Tobacco Vanille. To me, it makes it a little bit less cloying of a scent than what Tobacco Vanille is. Tobacco Vanille is definitely going to be the more sort of denser, more heavier sort of scent than what Vanille En Tobacco is. Now, in terms of the performance of the scents, and I'm just talking just strictly about Vanille En Tobacco and Tobacco Touch. Vanille En Tobacco is definitely going to give you better projection and better longevity than what Tobacco Touch will. Now, both of these scents are still going to be 8+ hour scents. At least they are on me anyway. But when it comes to the Vanille En Tobacco, it gives you, I would say, at least probably about almost double the projection than what Tobacco Touch does. Now, keep in mind that my bottle of Vanille En Tobacco is, I believe, almost a year old at this point. Let's see here. Yeah, this is actually a year old. So this one was produced in August of last year. Obviously, it's August of 2024. So that fragrance has had enough time to sort of sit and maturate. Even though, I've just kind of gotten this fragrance maybe a couple of weeks ago. And then, the Tobacco Touch, I don't have the box sitting here with me right now, but I know I bought this fragrance last year as well. So it's had plenty of time to, kind of maturate and, kind of get stronger. So just speaking just strictly off of how these two fragrances smell, obviously once they've sort of maturated, for sure the Vanille En Tobacco, in my opinion, smells a lot better. The longevity on it or on the Vanille En Tobacco is definitely going to be into the next day. When it comes to the Tobacco Touch, I also get into the next day with that fragrance as well. But again, it just isn't as sort of, it doesn't push as much as what the Vanille En Tobacco does. The Vanille En Tobacco is also denser than what the Tobacco Touch is. Like I said before, earlier in this video, the Tobacco Touch to me is just more of sort of like a more watered down, in my opinion, I would say less niche smelling version of Tobacco Vanille. It's a lot simpler in my opinion than what Tobacco Vanille is, just off the simple fact that you really don't get much of, sort of like that dried fruit smell from the Tobacco Touch. I really don't pick up on much of any sort of tobacco in the fragrance. And then again, you don't have that sort of thick honey note that you get from something like Tobacco Vanille. All right. So if I'm going to give each one of these a closeness rating on a scale from 1 to 100, for a Tobacco Touch, I would say Tobacco Touch is about 70% pretty much Tobacco Vanille. All right. And then for Vanille En Tobacco, in my opinion, is about 85% Tobacco Vanille. All right. Now, as far as the overall rating for Tobacco Touch, I would have to give that one an 8 out of 10. I do still enjoy the way the Tobacco Touch smells, but now that I've smelled Vanille En Tobacco, I do enjoy that fragrance a lot more. And then for Vanille En Tobacco, if I'm going to give that one a rating, that one I would give about a 9.2 out of 10. So again, I do actually prefer the way the Vanille En Tobacco smells and the way it sort of works with my skin chemistry a little bit more than what I do with the Tobacco Vanille. All right. So that's just my opinion, and that's how it comes across on me. You may think differently, if you smelled the original and if you smelled these other two clones, maybe you like the original a little bit more. But at least for me, I really enjoy the way that Vanille En Tobacco smells. So that would be the one that I would absolutely recommend to anybody that's looking for a really good sort of Tobacco Vanille clone. All right. So that is my take on the fragrances. Let me know what you all think about either Tobacco Touch or Vanille En Tobacco. Do you agree with how close I said these fragrances are to the original? And if not, definitely let me know in the comments. Also, if you're brand new to the channel, do me a favor, go ahead and subscribe. And again, that's Jamar from Vegas Scents. I'll see you on the next video.